Okay, so you'll have dots, connect the dots, and that'll make the profile of your sheath. I've already done that, so here's a template that I can reuse. Same concept, attach it to my piece of leather, and then I'm just gonna draw around the inside profile. Now don't be sloppy and make pin marks like I did. Couple comments. There's a center line and you want some offset, because if you make it just exactly a tracing of the knife, then you won't have enough material to wrap around the knife. And you're gonna need a welt, which is this strip of material here, and you'll need plenty of room for that as well. So make sure to offset a little bit and then trace. Otherwise, you'll scrap your piece of leather when you go to taco it and find out that your knife doesn't fit. I've traced out my welt already on my template, and I can do that, but honestly, if I'm just gonna use this as scrap, I'm not going to try to save this as a template. I've already got the perfect radius right here, so I'm gonna offset that and cut this out, and that'll be my welt. It doesn't have to be perfect, but the closer you get it now, the better it's gonna be as far as fitting your knife. And having enough room for your welt. So that's pretty good. This is our welt, and it's just gonna go inside here. And if you don't have it lined up well, the welt won't line up very well either. Or you won't have enough room for your welt. And when you drill, you'll be blowing out the other side. See, I don't like that. It's a little bit too much mismatch right there. So I'm gonna fight that a little bit more. I think it's close enough, I can make it work. Take the knife and just quick test fit, just to see if it wraps around it, will you have enough material. And if you have a thicker handle, you gotta be mindful of that as well. And that looks like I've got plenty of room for the welt. So even if I trim this off a little bit to make it even, I can still fit the knife in there comfortably. so you can see. I'm gonna let this dry overnight, then I'll trim it up tomorrow. All right, so it's ground decently, everything's even. And now it's time to trim the sides, but before I do that, I do want to just dry check with the knife before we go much further, because at this point, if you can't get your knife in your sheath, there's no sense in drilling and sewing and doing all of that. If you need to change something, now is the time to figure that out. So just gonna gently slide the knife in. See that goes in. Now, I don't want to push it in so that it splits what I just glued, but I want to push it in far enough that I know that, all right, it's gonna go in. And that's barely just cutting into the welt in that one little spot. And that's acceptable to me. So this looks good. So we'll begin trimming in drilling and then sewing. Now this is where I got a little bit sloppy with my pen when I was tracing the template. And I usually don't do that, but I did it today, so, or actually last night. So I'm gonna cut this back just a little bit to try to remove some of that pen mark. And this one's too far back, so I might just sand this a little bit, but I might just see what happens when I put oil on it since it's dark. Excuse me, not oil, wax, and work it in. It may just look fine, but I'm gonna trim this back a little bit more so I can get rid of some of that pen mark there. Looks fine. Now we're going to mark the line for where we're going to drill, and this little tool is going to cut just a little trench for where the thread can go. And you want to set it up basically in the midpoint of the welt, so it's kind of hard to see here, but this side is just going to run along the edge of the sheath like so. And I want to make sure that when I adjust this distance, that it's going to put the scribe about the midpoint of that hole. So I don't know if you can see that, but that's about the midpoint of the hole, which is the midpoint of the welt. See the welt down in there? And this looks pretty good. I think I'm going to cut it there. I'm gonna hit this on the grinder just to put a little bit better radius on it. I won't film that, but that's all I'm gonna do, and I'll be right back. All right, so put a little bit better radius on it, and then just bumped it on the grinder to thin it a little bit as well. And now this is going to fold over back this way, because this is the front of the sheath. So it's gonna fold over this way. But before I do that, I'm gonna mark right here where I'm going to have a guide to sew and drill and all that. So I'm gonna actually adjust this a little bit bigger, get a little bit deeper in there. I take my thumbnail and I just trace right along this. That gives me kind of a little bit of mark. I can kind of see that. It's very light, but I can still see it. Where I'll come back to that in just a second. Take a little bit of sandpaper, and I'm just going to rough this up a little bit, just inside that radius that I marked with my thumbnail. And then I push this a little bit forward past the glue and let it drag it back rather than just smashing it down and it squirts glue forward. So I bend it just a little bit past the glue and then come back so that I know that I'm getting a good coverage and it's not squirting out in front of the belt loop too much. Of course you'll still get a little bit of squeeze out, but if you go directly straight on it, it's just going to push most of your glue out. The glue dries pretty quick. Sometimes I'll just put a clamp on this, but I'm just going to hold it for about 30 seconds. It'll dry enough. Let me take it over the drill. Now, one thing, I get in the bad habit of doing it this way, and you've got to be careful because you'll drill right through. It's actually better to do the belt loop first before you do the fold, but I have kind of a bad habit of doing it this way. So when you're going to drill, just got to make sure you don't go all the way through and drill through the front. And it also makes a little bit of a challenge threading as well, because you got to open this up in here. So just keep in mind it's probably better to do this before you actually fold this. You got to finish the last two holes or so with the 2-prong, because the 4-prong will not end exactly right, and it's also hard to get on the radius. So just step it over here with the 2 and end it like that. So now it's ready to head to the drill. Got our markings. Let's head over to the drill press. Have a 1/16 of an inch bit, and we're going to just drill these holes. So when you're doing with the punch, you're just trying to get location. You're really not trying to go through. If you try to force one of those marking tools all the way through, it will split your stuff and give you a hard time. So do this side first. You need some wax thread, a lighter, some small scissors. Use a decently small needle, but I like these that have kind of a good little flat on them, on the tip, kind of a lead-in flat. And then you'll need, I use a small pair of channel locks to pull through. Start on the back side, farthest left hole. Pull it all the way through till about 2 inches left hanging out. Then you're gonna hold that when you come back through so that you've got something to tie off to and also keep cinching. Just hold this side and pull it tight. Once you get it all the way through, all the holes, cinch it up tight, then we're gonna go back stitch it. So last hole we came through, step over one, and we're gonna go to the second last, and then go backwards. This is where the channel locks come in. Back stitching gets a little bit tougher to just pull it through by hand. Now I'm going to back stitch one more time, coming back this way. But before I do that, I'm going to pull our first thread nice and tight, the first end that we had left over here. So I'm going to pull both of those as tight as I can. Make sure there's no slack built up here. Then I'm going to go back one over and come back through. Like that. Everything's tight. Cut it off. And then we'll tie this and then burn it. Same process for here. So I got roughly 7 times the length of the sheath for my thread. Can thread the needle, then do the exact same process. Start on the back side, come through, go all the way down, come back, end on this side after having back stitched it a second time, tie it off, burn it. I don't even tie the thread off on the needle. Get about 1.5 inches through and then just pull on it, and it kind of, the wax thread sets itself a little bit so it doesn't come off, as long as you're not crazy with it. Same process, all the way down, then back. After you've got about 5 or so down, you don't have to hold this first thread anymore. You can just kind of go to town on it and keep pulling it tight. Last one on the top from the front side. Now start going back. All right, coming down to the end. It's the last couple stitches. Okay, we're on the same side on the back side, but I'm gonna go 1 through on the same side as the same hole that this thread is sticking out, and then come back. So same hole. And before I pull this one all the way tight, I want to also pull on this one. Same time, trying to get them both tight. Okay. Now I'm on the front side of the sheath. I'm going to go 1 over and back stitch it. So that'll be 1 over on the other side. Like that. And this is my favorite part because I'm basically done stitching, which is kind of a chore by hand. All right, cut this off, tie it off. Burn it. So it's all sewn. Now we're ready to shape it and then put wax on it. To shape it, we'll put our knife in the sheath and then we will wet around the knife. So I'm pushing it in basically where I want it to stop. This is a pretty thick handle, so it's gonna push it out a little bit, and that's okay. What we're gonna do is we're gonna wet the leather all around that. And I don't really like this part because I don't like getting water on my knife. So I'm going to take my knife back out and just wet the sheath a little bit around where I know I'm going to have to bend it around the knife. And then I'll put my knife back in. I just don't like getting a nice, pretty, clean, finished, polished knife wet. But it's a little bit of a necessary evil here. Put the knife back in. I'm gonna hold it down right there. And then I'm just gonna use my thumb to work it in. And I'm just bending the leather around the knife, front and back, wanting it to shape around that handle. So, basic idea. A little more water right here. This takes a bit of strength to do it by hand. I mean, not like the Hulk or anything like that, but you gotta push pretty hard to get that leather to really form around that handle. That's looking pretty good. I like that. It's a nice tight fit as well. Knife is not coming out of there. It is a happy home for this knife. The next step is putting some wax on this and sealing it up. We'll do that next. So this knife is ready to get wax applied, so we are going to take it over to the oven and heat up the sheath just a little bit. That way the wax soaks into it well. So let's go do that. Set my little oven to warm. Throw the sheath in there without the knife. And give it about a minute, maybe 2. All right, think it's good. Let's take it over to the bench. Apply some wax. Just to note, earlier I had a little pin mark right here, the blue pin, and now that I've got wax on it, you can't even see it, so not worried about it. you have too much wax in one spot, it'll just be a big dark spot. You kind of want to work it around until it's all pretty even. And I find taking it to the oven and letting the wax heat up again all over the surface, it kind of sweats a little bit, and then you can smooth it out. One thing to note as well, you probably can't see it very well, but there is a tiny light spot right there, and that's from a little bit of the leather glue. It's hard to see, but there's a little bitty tiny light spot right there at the edge of the belt loop, and that leather glue is keeping the wax from penetrating in that one little spot. So you want to keep the leather glue off of the outside surface of your sheath as much as possible. All right, I'm gonna go take this, heat it up, and finish blending in the wax. Then we'll sign it and we're done. Turn it up a little bit. Watch it start sweating. See, it's kind of sweating. I'm gonna take that out and blend it in. All right, final step in the process. Taking out the tiny little engraver and then signing the back. And this is knife number 39.